The friend who blocked me and blew up her own life. If someone had told me that a friendship built over almost 2 decades would end because of lies, a wrecked house, and a marriage collapsing like a badly stacked house of cards, I would have laughed. Loudly. That sarcastic laugh you give when you're absolutely convinced. That could never be me. Well, surprise, my friends. It can be you. And when it is, it's ugly. Because this wasn't some casual friendship. This was the kind of bond you swear will survive wrinkles, bad knees, and complaining about overpriced coffee in a retirement home. The kind of person who knows your history, your insecurities, your emotional passwords, and still chooses to throw you under the bus. Reverse included. Foot fully on the gas. So grab a coffee or whatever beverage gets you through nonsense and sit with me for a minute. Because this story is messy, dramatic, infuriating, and a little too real. Welcome back to Lying Whispers, where we say the quiet parts out loud. Hit subscribe, tap the like button, and share this with that friend who lives for chaotic story times. And tell me this right now, how far would your loyalty go before it turns into self-betrayal? Her name was Clara. Nothing flashy about the name. The situation, though? Different story. Clara was in her early 30s, married, stable, living a relatively calm life. No scandals. No secret chaos. And she had a best friend she'd known since they were teenagers. Her name was Elisa. Elisa was intense. Always had been. The kind of person who walks into your life with charm, confidence, and just enough chaos that you excuse it as personality. Clara had been doing that for years. They grew up together. Shared apartments. Shared heartbreaks. Shared secrets that would never survive daylight. They were bridesmaids in each other's weddings. They survived bad jobs, worse breakups, and decisions that only make sense once you're far removed from them. Clara genuinely believed Elisa was family. And you defend family. Until family hands you the match and watches you burn. It started small. It always does. Elisa began talking about a new coworker. A little too often. A little too enthusiastically. His name was Lucas. And every time Elisa mentioned him, her tone shifted. She smiled more. Laughed harder. Added unnecessary details. He just gets me. We have the same sense of humor. He actually listens. Clara listened to, and quietly judged. Because Elisa was married. Her husband, Renato, wasn't exciting. He was steady, predictable, the kind of man who plans ahead and believes in consistency. Not thrilling, but loyal. And very much unaware that he was slowly being sidelined in his own marriage. Clara tried to be gentle at first, then honest, then blunt. Be careful, she told Elisa one night. Crushes fade. Consequences don't. Elisa laughed it off. That defensive little laugh people use when they know they're crossing a line, but don't want to admit it. You're being dramatic. I love my husband. Ah, yes. The classic line. Clara swallowed her discomfort. Because that's what long friendships teach you to do, ignore the alarm bells until they're deafening. A few weeks later, Elisa invited Clara and her husband over to her brother's place. Said it would be a small get-together. People coming and going. Drinks. Food. A casual night. Sounded harmless. It wasn't. When they arrived, Clara noticed it immediately. Too quiet. Too empty. Hardly any cars outside. Elisa opened the door, smiling. Inside the house, there was only one other person. Lucas. Sitting on the couch. Way too comfortable. Clara felt her stomach drop. Where is everyone? She asked. Elisa avoided eye contact. Plans changed. Of course they did. The explanation was messy. Her brother was out of town. She didn't want to be alone. Thought it would be safer to invite people. Didn't mention it beforehand.
Lied.
Created a whole fake scenario just to make sure Clara would show up. Because she knew that if she told the truth, Clara would have said no. And when someone has to lie to get you there, they already know they're doing something wrong. They stayed. Games were played. Drinks were poured. Well, Elisa and Lucas drank. They laughed. They leaned closer. Too close. Clara watched it all like a slow-motion train wreck. You see it coming, but you're powerless to stop it. When Elisa rested her head on Lucas' shoulder, Clara stood up. We're leaving. No one argued. No one apologized. No one cared. On the drive home, something shifted inside Clara. Not anger yet. Disappointment. The heavy kind. The kind that settles in your chest and refuses to move. She tried calling Elisa the next day. No answer. Texts unread. Silence. Until the phone rang. It was Eliza's brother. He was furious. Yelling. Accusing. His house had been trashed. Bottles everywhere. Food left out. Cigarette butts. And the final detail that made Clara's blood run cold. A used condom in his bed. And Eliza's explanation? She blamed Clara. My friends, that's not just betrayal. That's strategic betrayal. Clara tried to explain. He wouldn't listen. She called Elisa. No answer. So she sent a message. A warning. A final chance. Silence. Then blocked. Everywhere. And that's where the story takes its turn. Because when someone decides to sacrifice you to save themselves, you have a choice. Protect them. Or protect yourself. And Clara chose. She told the truth. She told Eliza's husband everything. And just like that, the illusion shattered. But the question still hangs in the air. Did Clara go too far, or did she finally stop paying the price for someone else's lies? When the truth starts collecting interest. Clara didn't hang up the phone shaking. She hung up quiet, not calm, not relieved, just still. That frozen kind of stillness you get when your brain is catching up to what your heart already knows. The truth was out now. Not twisted, not dramatized, just laid out, clean and simple. And once truth leaves your mouth, you lose control of how it lands. That part terrified her more than anything else. She barely slept that night. Not because she felt guilty that ship had sailed the moment Elisa used her name as cover. What kept Clara awake was grief. The grief of realizing the person she loved wasn't who she thought she was. The next morning, her phone lit up with notifications. First, a message from Renato.
Short. Calm.
Polite. He thanked her. He said things had felt off for months. Late nights. Guarded phone habits. Emotional distance disguised as stress. He hadn't wanted to believe it, but now the pieces finally fit. There was no explosion. No screaming match. No dramatic confrontation. Something worse. Confirmation. Renato didn't confront Elisa right away.
He watched.
He waited. And in that waiting, the truth kept revealing itself. Messages that weren't innocent. Conversations that crossed lines so cleanly there was no room left for denial. Clara found out weeks later that Elisa had tried to minimize it all. It was just flirting. It didn't mean anything. You're overreacting. Classic greatest hits. But evidence doesn't care about excuses. The marriage didn't end overnight. It dissolved slowly, quietly, the way things do when there's nothing left to fight for. And Elisa? She spiraled. Not in the cinematic way. In the subtle, messy way people do when consequences finally show up uninvited. She reached out to mutual friends. Told a version of the story where she was misunderstood. Where Clara was dramatic. Where everyone else had failed her. And here's the funny thing, my friends and people believed her. Because it's easier to side with chaos than accept that someone you like did something unforgivable. Clara watched all of this from a distance. She didn't correct anyone. She didn't defend herself. She didn't explain. And that was new, because the old Clara would have scrambled to be understood, to fix the narrative, to make sure everyone knew she wasn't the villain. This Clara? She was tired. And tired people don't argue with lies anymore. They just step away. Months passed. Life settled. The drama stopped being daily background noise and turned into something distant, manageable, until one random Tuesday afternoon. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Clara stared at the screen longer than she wanted to admit. She almost declined it. Almost. But curiosity or closure won. Clara? The voice was familiar. Lower. Quieter. Less confident. It was Elisa. Silence filled the line. The heavy kind. I didn't think you'd answer, Elisa said carefully. Clara exhaled. You blocked me, she replied. I know. That late acknowledgement again. Always late. Elisa started talking fast, like she was afraid Clara might hang up. She said the divorce had been hard. That she felt alone. That people judged her without knowing the full story. Clara listened. She always did.
But she noticed something this time.
Not once did Elisa say, I'm sorry. Instead, she said, I miss you. And that was the moment, my friends. The exact fork in the road. Clara paused. Do you miss me, she asked, or do you miss having someone who used to absorb the fallout for you? Silence. Long, thick. Uncomfortable. I messed up, Elisa said quietly. But you didn't have to go that far. Clara almost laughed. I didn't go far, she said. I stopped lying. Elisa cried. Said she was lost. Said she didn't recognize her life anymore. Said she didn't know who she was without the marriage or the friendship. And here's the truth no one likes hearing. I can't help you rebuild your life on the same foundation that crushed mine. Elisa pushed back. Said Clara exaggerated. Said things should have stayed private. Clara's voice stayed calm. The moment you blamed me for something I didn't do, you ended that option. Another silence. So that's it? Elisa asked. You're just cutting me off? Clara thought for a moment. I'm not cutting you off, she said. I'm choosing myself. And that was it. Elisa hung up. No screaming. No grand apology. No promise to change. Just the sound of something finally ending. Clara sat there afterward, phone still in her hand. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel relieved. She felt sad. But it was a clean sadness. The kind that doesn't come with regret. Because some people don't come back into your life to stay. They come back to prove that walking away was the right choice. What's left after the dust settles? Clara thought that phone call would be the final chapter. You know, the emotional full stop. The closure moment. The scene where the camera slowly zooms out and the music fades. You know, life is rarely that considerate. What followed wasn't drama. It was quieter than that. And honestly, that's what made it harder. Weeks went by with no contact. No messages. No accidental likes. No just checking in texts pretending to be innocent. Elisa disappeared again, this time for real. And for the first time, Clara noticed something strange. Her nervous system relaxed. No walking on eggshells. No anticipating emotional emergencies. No bracing herself before opening her phone. Just peace. Boring, beautiful peace. She hadn't realized how much space Elisa had been taking up in her head until that space was suddenly empty. And once it was, Clara started noticing other things. She slept better. She laughed easier. She stopped over-explaining herself. It turns out, my friends, that when you stop managing someone else's chaos, you get your energy back. Who knew? But don't worry, the universe hates unresolved tension. A few months later, the whispers started. Mutual acquaintances mentioning Eliza's name casually. Always casually. Like it wasn't loaded. She's doing better now. She says she's learned a lot. She feels really misunderstood.
Ah, yes.
The redemption arc narrated exclusively by the person who caused the mess. Apparently, Elisa had been telling her version of the story. A carefully edited one. One where she made mistakes, sure, but everyone else overreacted. One where Clara was cold, judgmental, too harsh. And Harry's the part that would have destroyed old Clara. Some people believed her. But something had shifted. Clara didn't feel the urge to correct anyone. Didn't feel the itch to defend herself. Didn't feel that familiar panic of what if they think I'm the bad guy? Because when you're at peace with your choices, public opinion loses its grip. And that, my friends, is growth. Then came the test. The real one. A mutual friend invited Clara to a small gathering. Casual. Low stakes. She almost said no out of habit, not fear, but decided to go. And guess who walked in 20 minutes later? Elisa. No dramatic entrance. No announcement. Just presence. The room shifted. You know that feeling. When the air changes and everyone pretends not to notice. Elisa looked different.
Softer. Smaller.
Less certain. Their eyes met. For a second, time stalled. Then Elisa smiled. Careful. Polite. Almost hopeful. Clara nodded back. That was it. No hug. No confrontation. No emotional ambush in the kitchen. And Harry's the wild part. Elisa looked disappointed. Because Clara didn't give her what she wanted. Not anger. Not forgiveness. Not access. Just neutrality. And neutrality is brutal when someone expects a reaction. Later that night, someone asked Clara quietly, "Are you okay? Seeing her again?"
Clara thought about it. Really thought about it.
"Yeah," she said. "I am." And she meant it. Because the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And indifference only comes when you fully let go. So let me ask you something, my friends, and be honest with yourself. How many people are you still emotionally available to even though they lost that privilege a long time ago? How often do you confuse history with obligation? And how peaceful would your life be if you stopped reopening doors that only lead to chaos? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't forgiving. It's moving on without needing an apology. Drop your thoughts in the comments seriously. I want to hear them. Like, subscribe, share this with someone who's still waiting for closure from people who don't deserve access. Until next time, my friends, this was Lying Whispers.